The Millionaire's Children. The Millionaire's children cried day and night until the nanny did something unexpected. Without asking permission, she entered their room, lay down between them, and sang a song no one knew. The silence that followed touched even the father's heart, who watched from afar, trying to understand who this woman was. He didn't know yet, but he had begun to fall in love. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. We'll continue. I promise this will be the best story you'll ever hear in your life. The living room clock struck 5 in the morning when the whimpering began again. Richard Mitchell woke with a start, cold sweat running down his forehead, while the twins' cries echoed through the corridors of the mansion. 6 months had passed since the accident, and the nightly nightmare continued to be a constant in this house that was once filled with laughter. He rose from the couch where he'd been sleeping for weeks, unable to return to the bedroom he'd shared with Helen. The Italian marble-covered walls reflected his hunched figure, prematurely aged by grief. At 42, the businessman who commanded a civil construction empire found himself completely lost before 2 10-month-old babies who cried inconsolably. "Mr. Richard, I can," murmured Mrs. Carmen, the housekeeper who had worked for the family for 15 years, appearing at the door with eyes swollen from interrupted sleep. "No, Carmen, go back to your room." His voice came out harsher than he intended. He couldn't accept help from anyone. It was as if each caring gesture from others was confirmation of his own inadequacy. He climbed the marble stairs, each step weighing like lead on his bare feet. The twins' room was in turmoil. Peter and Sophie, with their golden hair inherited from their mother, were squirming in their cribs, their little faces red from crying. The most expensive pediatrician in the city had visited the house the previous week, stating that there was nothing physically wrong with the children. It was trauma, he said. Babies feel when something vital breaks in the family environment. Richard picked up Peter, trying to repeat the movements he had seen Helen make so naturally. The boy struggled even more, as if sensing the insecurity in those trembling arms. Sophie continued crying in her crib, her little blue eyes wet with tears that seemed endless. "Please stop," he whispered, feeling his own tears burning his eyes. "I don't know what to do. I don't know how to take care of you without her." Despair enveloped him like a cold wave. He put Peter back in the crib and sat in the chair beside it, burying his face in his hands. The children's sobs mingled with his own, creating a symphony of pain that echoed through the silent mansion. That's when he heard light footsteps in the hallway. He raised his head, expecting to see Mrs. Carmen disobeying his orders, but the person who appeared at the door was a woman he barely knew. Claire Roberts, the new nanny hired by the agency 2 weeks earlier, observed the scene with serene, compassionate eyes. "Excuse me, Mr. Richard. I know you said not to interfere, but—" She hesitated, biting her lower lip. "May I try to calm them down?" Richard observed her for a moment. Claire was different from the other nannies who had passed through the house. She didn't wear impeccable uniforms or speak with the artificial voice that characterized expensive professionals. She was about 35, with brown hair tied in a simple bun, and carried a tranquility that contrasted with the chaos around her. "You can try, but I've already warned you that they won't stop crying. None of the specialists could help." His voice carried the weariness of someone who had lost all hope. Claire approached slowly, as if each movement was calculated not to frighten either the babies or the desperate father. She picked up Sophie first, holding her with a gentle firmness that instantly conveyed security. The girl reduced her crying to soft hiccups. "Shh, my angel. Everything's okay now." Claire murmured sweet words while gently rocking her body. Her voice had a natural musicality, as if each word was part of an ancient song. Peter continued crying in his crib, but Claire showed no rush. She continued calming Sophie until the girl quieted completely, nestling against her shoulder. Only then did she approach Peter's crib, picking him up with her free arm. "You miss her, don't you?" Claire spoke softly, but Richard heard every word. "It's normal to miss her. She must have been very special." Richard felt his chest tighten. No one had spoken about Helen so naturally since the accident. Everyone avoided the subject, as if mentioning his wife would reopen wounds. But Claire spoke of her as if her presence still echoed in that room. Slowly, Peter's crying also diminished. Claire moved around the room with both babies in her arms, humming a soft melody that Richard didn't recognize. It was a simple song, almost a whisper, but there was something in it that calmed not only the children, but the entire environment. When she finally put the twins back in their cribs, they were asleep. The silence that settled in the room wasn't the heavy silence of despair, but a peaceful quietude that the house hadn't known for months. "How did you do that?" Richard asked, his voice almost a whisper, so as not to wake the children. Claire adjusted the blankets over the babies before answering. "Sometimes they just need to feel that they're not alone, that someone understands what they're missing." There was something in the way she spoke, a deep understanding that went beyond professional experience. Richard noticed how her eyes fixed for a moment on Helen's photograph on the dresser and saw a shadow of sadness cross her face. "Do you have children?" he asked, moved by a curiosity he couldn't contain. Claire hesitated before answering, her fingers nervously playing with the strap of the bag she carried. "I did. A long time ago." The answer came laden with a pain that Richard instantly recognized. It was the same pain he carried, only dressed in a resignation he hadn't yet achieved. He didn't ask anything more. Some wounds were too sacred to be exposed by strangers. "Thank you." It was all he could say, but his words carried a gratitude that went far beyond the moment. Claire nodded silently and headed for the door. Before leaving, she turned one last time. "If you need me during the night, I'll be in the staff bedroom. Don't hesitate to call." When left alone with his sleeping children, Richard allowed himself a moment of relief he hadn't felt in months. For the first time, the mansion seemed less empty, less cold. There was something in Claire's presence that brought unexpected peace, as if she had brought with her a piece of humanity that had been lost in that house. The following days brought a subtle but noticeable change to the mansion's routine. Richard observed Claire from afar, intrigued by how naturally she moved through the house, as if she had always belonged in that space. Unlike the other nannies who had passed through, she showed no intimidation before the ostentatious luxury or the formality that characterized the environment. It was Thursday when Richard decided to work from home, setting up in the office near the children's room. He needed to finalize contracts for the new construction in the city center, but found himself constantly distracted by sounds coming from upstairs. They were no longer the desperate cries that had tormented him for months. They were laughs, crystal-clear giggles from the twins that he had forgotten existed. Curious, he climbed the stairs and stopped at the nursery door. Claire was sitting on the plush rug, with Peter and Sophie around her. She held a colorful book and made different voices for each character, gesturing dramatically, which drew giggles from the babies. Sophie clapped her little hands every time Claire imitated a duckling's sound, while Peter tried to reach the pages with his chubby little hands. Once upon a time, there was a little duckling who thought he was very ugly. Claire modulated her voice, creating an engaging narrative, but actually he was special in a way he didn't yet know. Richard watched from the door, fascinated by the transformation of his children. For weeks he hadn't seen them so alive, so present. Claire seemed to have a natural gift for connecting with them, as if she spoke a secret language that only the three of them understood. "Daddy?" Sophie pointed to the door, having noticed his presence. Claire turned, a slight blush covering her cheeks. "Sorry, Mr. Richard, I didn't know you were working. I can take the children somewhere else." "No need." Richard entered the room, feeling like an intruder in his own home. "They seem happy here." Peter crawled across the rug to his father, raising his little arms in a clear request to be held. Richard picked him up, surprised by the spontaneity of the gesture. It had been so long since his children had shown genuine affection for him. "You're good at this," Richard commented, observing how Sophie continued flipping through the book, even without knowing how to read. "They're special children. They just needed time to feel safe again." Claire organized the toys scattered on the floor, her movements precise and careful. "How do you know so much about children?" The question came out before Richard could filter his curiosity. Claire paused for a moment, a shadow crossing her face. "Experience teaches many things, sometimes in ways we don't want to learn." There was a depth in that answer that intrigued Richard even more. He noticed how Claire avoided talking about herself, always redirecting the conversation to the children or to practical matters of the routine. "Miss Claire makes the best cereal in the world," interrupted Mrs. Carman, appearing at the door with a tray. "The children eat everything without complaining." It was true. In the last few weeks, Peter and Sophie had regained their appetite and were visibly healthier. Their rosy cheeks had regained their former glow, and their eyes sparkled with the curiosity typical of their age. "What's the secret?" Richard asked, genuinely interested. "There's no secret. You just make it with love." Claire smiled for the first time since arriving at the house, and Richard was surprised by how this simple gesture completely transformed her face. That afternoon, Richard cancelled his meetings and decided to stay home. He observed Claire throughout the day, noticing small details that had gone unnoticed. The way she hummed while changing the children's diapers, how her eyes filled with tenderness when they did something funny, how she seemed genuinely happy caring for them. At night, after putting the twins to bed, Claire was heading to her room when Richard intercepted her in the hallway. "Would you like some coffee, Mrs.? Carmen made chocolate cake." Claire hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the informality of the invitation. "I don't know if it's appropriate, Mr. Richard. I'm just the nanny." "You've saved my mental sanity these past few weeks. I think that deserves at least a coffee." Seated in the spacious kitchen, a comfortable silence settled between them. Richard watched Claire stir sugar into her coffee, noticing how her hands were delicate but marked by work. There was a natural elegance about her that was independent of expensive clothes or sophisticated jewelry. "May I ask you a personal question?" Richard ventured. Claire raised her eyes, a mixture of caution and curiosity in her gaze. "I can try. Why did you choose to work as a nanny?" The question caught her off guard. Claire lowered her eyes, playing with the cup handle. "Sometimes life takes us down paths we didn't plan, and sometimes we discover that these paths make more sense than we thought." "You speak from personal experience?" "We all have our losses, Mr. Richard. The difference is how we choose to deal with them." There was a mature wisdom in these words that deeply touched Richard. He recognized in her the same pain he carried, but transformed into something constructive, into care and love directed toward others. "You can call me Richard. Mr. Richard makes me feel like my father." Claire smiled again, and this time the smile lasted longer. "All right, Richard." The name sounded different coming from her lips, softer, more intimate. Richard felt something move in his chest, a sensation he had forgotten existed. "The children adore you. I haven't seen them this happy in weeks. They miss their mother, but they're learning that there's still love around them. They just needed someone to show them that. And you? Don't you miss having your own family?" The question went too far. Richard realized this immediately by the way Claire's face closed, as if a door had been suddenly locked. "I should go to sleep. Tomorrow will be a long day." Claire stood up, avoiding looking directly at him. "Claire, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to invade your privacy. It wasn't an invasion, just some wounds take longer to heal." She paused at the kitchen door. "Good night, Richard." Alone in the kitchen, Richard reflected on the conversation. There were layers to Claire that he had barely begun to scratch, a complexity that awakened his curiosity, and, he admitted to himself, his interest. For the first time in months, he found himself thinking about something other than the pain of loss. Saturday morning arrived with a torrential rain that lashed the windows of the mansion. Richard woke up later than usual, surprised by the uncommon silence. Normally, the twins would have been awake an hour ago, filling the house with their morning babbling. Concerned, he quickly went upstairs. What he found momentarily paralyzed him at the door. Claire was lying on the king-size bed that had been set up in the children's room, with Peter and Sophie nestled on either side of her body. The three were sleeping deeply, breathing in the same rhythm, as if they were a family that had always been together. The scene awakened contradictory emotions in Richard. On one hand, he felt gratitude at seeing his children so serene, so secure. On the other, a pang of jealousy and inadequacy hit him like a punch. He was being replaced in his own children's lives by a stranger he'd known for just a month. "Richard?" The voice startled him. Claire had awakened and was watching him from the bed, careful not to disturb the children. "Sorry, I didn't hear any noise and got worried." He tried to sound casual, but his voice betrayed his discomfort. Claire rose slowly, accommodating the babies who continued sleeping. They had nightmares during the night. Peter woke up crying at 3 in the morning, and Sophie soon after. I tried to calm them in their cribs, but they only settled down when I lay down with them. "You don't need to do that. They have to learn to sleep alone." There was a coldness in Richard's voice that Claire immediately perceived. She stared at him for a moment, as if trying to decipher the origin of the sudden change in his behavior. "Of course, you're right. It won't happen again." The rest of the day passed in a tense atmosphere. Richard locked himself in his office, trying to concentrate on work, but constantly distracted by sounds from upstairs. Claire maintained her routine with the children, but there was a cold formality in their interactions that hadn't existed before. It was during lunch that the situation exploded. Peter knocked his food plate to the floor and began to cry. Sophie, startled by the noise and her brother's despair, started crying too. Claire moved instinctively to calm the children, but Richard intercepted her. "I'll handle them." His voice came out harsher than he intended. He picked up Peter, trying to repeat the gestures he saw Claire do, but his hands trembled with nervousness, and the boy struggled even more, increasing the volume of his crying. Sophie continued screaming in her high chair, extending her little arms toward Claire. "Richard, let me help." Claire approached, but he backed away. "I don't need help, I'm their father." "No one is questioning that." "No? Then why do they prefer you? Why do they sleep better with you? Why do they only smile when you're around?" The words came out laden with a deep pain that Richard didn't know he was feeling. Claire observed him for a moment, her expression softening with understanding. "You think I'm trying to replace their mother? Or you? I don't know what you're trying to do." Richard put Peter back in his high chair, where the boy continued crying. "I just know they were my children before you arrived. And they still are." Claire approached slowly, as if dealing with an injured animal. "Richard, you're afraid." "Afraid of what?" "Of loving again. Of allowing yourself to be happy. Of accepting that life can continue even after loss." The words hit Richard like stones. He turned abruptly, facing Claire with a mixture of anger and vulnerability. "You don't know anything about my life, about what I lost. I know more than you imagine." Claire kept her voice calm, even with the children crying in the background. "I know what it's like to lose someone you love more than life itself. I know what it's like to wake up every day wishing it was just a nightmare. I know what it's like to look at an empty bed and feel that a part of you has been torn away forever." There were tears in Claire's eyes, but she didn't let them fall. Richard remained silent, surprised by the sudden vulnerability she was showing. "My son was 4 years old when he left us," Claire continued, her voice almost a whisper. "Leukemia. He fought for 2 years, and I was by his side every moment. When he was gone, I felt completely lost. I didn't know how to continue living in a world where he no longer existed." Richard felt the ground open beneath his feet. All his suspicions and intuitions about Claire were confirmed at once. The way she cared for Peter and Sophie, the naturalness with which she dealt with children, the recognizable pain in her eyes, it all made sense now. "Claire, I didn't know. How could you know? I don't talk about it. I don't talk about Gabriel." She pronounced her son's name with infinite tenderness. "But when I arrived here and saw you lost, saw these children suffering, I recognized the same pain that consumed me for years." The children had stopped crying, as if sensing the gravity of the moment. Peter looked at Claire with his curious little eyes, while Sophie extended her little arms to her. "You're not losing your children to me, Richard. You're gaining someone who understands your pain and wants to help heal it. Not to replace Helen, but to honor her memory by taking good care of the people she loved most." Richard sat heavily in one of the kitchen chairs, the weight of the revelation leaving him exhausted. He watched Claire pick up Sophie and extend her hand to Peter, who immediately grabbed her fingers. "Why didn't you tell me before?" "Because some wounds are too intimate to be shared with strangers, and because I wanted you to trust me for what you see, not out of pity for what I suffered." "And now? Now that I know?" Claire approached and sat beside him, still with Sophie in her arms. "Now you need to decide if you want to continue carrying this pain alone, or if you accept that sharing the burden can make it lighter." Richard looked at his children, then at Claire. For the first time in months, he didn't feel completely alone in the world. There was someone who understood his pain viscerally, someone who had gone through the same hell and survived. "I'm afraid," he finally admitted. "Of what?" "That liking you would be a betrayal of Helen's memory. That my children will become attached to you, and then you'll leave too. That I'll allow myself to be happy again, and fate will punish me for it." Claire put Sophie back in her high chair and turned to face Richard completely. "Love is not betrayal, Richard. Love is the purest way to honor those who are gone. Helen wouldn't want to see you suffering forever. She would want to know that her children are being loved and cared for. And you? What would you like?" The question caught Claire off guard. For a moment, she hesitated, as if fighting against her own defenses. I would like to believe that it's possible to love again without disrespecting those we've lost, that it's possible to build a new happiness on the foundations of experience and gratitude. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was laden with possibilities, with a mutual understanding that had been built on the solid foundation of shared pain and renewed hope. 2 weeks passed since the revealing conversation in the kitchen, and the dynamics in the mansion had completely changed. Richard no longer locked himself in the office during the day, preferring to work at the dining room table, from where he could observe Claire interacting with Peter and Sophie. There was a new transparency between them, built on the foundation of shared vulnerability. That sunny Thursday, Richard found Claire in the backyard garden, sitting on the grass with the children. Sophie crawled among the flowers, exploring the different textures under her little hands, while Peter tried to reach a butterfly that danced too close to be captured, but too far to give up the game. They seem different, Richard commented, sitting next to Claire on the grass. Children are like plants. With care and love, they naturally flourish. Claire smiled, watching Sophie trying to put a flower in her mouth. Careful, princess. Not everything beautiful is for eating. Richard laughed, a sound that echoed through the garden like long-forgotten music. Claire turned to look at him, surprised by the spontaneity of that moment of lightness. It's been a long time since I laughed like this, Richard admitted. Laughter heals the soul. Gabriel used to make me laugh even on the hardest days of treatment. Claire spoke of her son without the usual pain in her voice. He said that laughing was like feeding the heart. He seemed like a wise child. He was, much wiser than me in many things. Claire picked up Peter when he tired of chasing the butterfly. He taught me that love has no expiration date, that we can love someone forever and still have room in our hearts to love others. Richard felt his chest warm with these words. In recent weeks, he had constantly fought against the guilt of feeling something for Claire, as if it diminished the love he felt for Helen. Sometimes I find myself thinking about you during the day, he confessed, surprising himself with his honesty, and I feel guilty about it. Why? Because Helen was the love of my life, because we promised to be together forever, because you think having feelings for me means you loved her less. Richard nodded, unable to verbalize the conflict that tormented him. Claire turned to face him completely, Sophie playing with her loose hair. Richard, have you ever thought that perhaps Helen sent someone who would understand your pain, who would know how to care for her children the way she would? Do you believe that? I believe that true love wants the best for those it loves, even if that means finding happiness with someone else. At that moment, Peter began to cry, interrupting the intimate conversation. But this time, instead of letting Claire handle the situation alone, Richard extended his arms to his son. Come here, champion, what's wrong? Peter calmed instantly in his father's arms, nestling against his chest in a way he hadn't done for months. Richard felt his eyes fill with tears when he realized that his son finally recognized him as a source of comfort again. He just wanted attention from Daddy, Claire commented softly. That night, after putting the children to bed, Richard found Claire on the porch watching the stars. She wore a simple navy blue dress that Richard had never seen before, and her hair was loose, framing her face in a way that made her look younger. Beautiful night, he commented, sitting beside her on the wooden swing. Gabriel loved nights like this. He said that stars were points of light that angels lit to show us that we are never completely in the dark. He really was special. He was. And do you know what else he told me before he left? Claire turned to face him. He said that I couldn't stay sad forever, that he wanted me to be happy, to find other hearts to love. Richard felt his breath falter. There was an intensity in Claire's gaze that made him feel as if he were on the edge of a precipice, ready to jump or retreat. Claire, I fell in love with you, Richard. The words came out in a whisper, but carried a courage she didn't know she possessed. I fell in love with how you struggle to be a good father, even when you feel lost, with how your eyes light up when the children laugh, with how you carry your pain with dignity. Richard was silent for a moment, processing the declaration that changed everything between them. I fell in love with you too, he finally confessed, and that scares me more than anything I've ever felt in my life. Why? Because I'm afraid of losing again. Because I don't know if I'm capable of building a new family without betraying the memory of the old one. Claire moved closer, taking Richard's hands in hers. We're not building a new family, Richard. We're completing the one that already exists. Peter and Sophie will always be Helen's children too. I would never try to replace her. And what do you want from me? From us? Claire hesitated for a moment, as if gathering courage to verbalize her deepest dreams. I want to wake up every morning knowing I can care for the people I love. I want to see Peter and Sophie grow up surrounded by love and security. I want to build new happy memories on the foundation of the precious memories we already have. Richard freed one of his hands and caressed Claire's face, feeling the softness of her skin under his fingers. Are you sure you want this? A ready-made family, with all the complexities that involves? I'm sure I want you. I want us. I want this chance to be happy again. The kiss happened naturally, as if it were inevitable. Gentle at first, timid, testing limits and permissions, then more intense, laden with months of repressed tension and feelings that finally found permission to exist. When they separated, Richard rested his forehead against Claire's, deeply breathing in the soft perfume he had learned to associate with peace and home. I love you, he whispered, savoring the words as if they were a long-denied luxury. I love you too. In the months that followed, the transformation in the mansion was complete. The walls once again echoed with genuine laughter. Peter took his first steps running after Claire across the living room, while Sophie babbled words that were almost mommy whenever she saw her arrive. Richard learned to balance his professional responsibilities with family life, discovering that there was an unexpected joy in coming home and being greeted by warm hugs and wet baby kisses. Claire flourished in that environment of love and acceptance. Her smiles became more frequent. Her eyes regained the sparkle that sadness had stolen. She decorated the house with photographs of the new family, but kept Helen's photos in prominent places, teaching the children to kiss their hand and touch the photo of Mommy in heaven every night before bed. On the first anniversary of Claire's arrival at the mansion, Richard organized a small celebration in the garden. As he watched Claire playing with Peter and Sophie among the flowers, he felt a deep gratitude for the tortuous path that had led them to that moment. Helen would forever remain the children's mother and his first love. But Claire had brought life back to that house, had taught all of them that it was possible to honor the past while building a future full of hope. That night, after putting the twins to bed, Richard and Claire sat on the porch, watching the stars that Gabriel had said were points of light in the darkness. And in that moment, with Claire's hand intertwined with his, Richard knew he had found his way back to happiness. Love had been reborn in that house, stronger and wiser than before, built on the solid foundation of overcome loss and gratitude for the second chance that life had offered them. The end. Dear listeners, we hope that Richard and Claire's story has touched your hearts the same way it touched ours in telling it. This is a story about how true love can be reborn even after the greatest losses, about how two wounded souls can heal each other, and about how a family can form in unexpected and wonderful ways. To continue this emotional journey with us, we've prepared a special playlist with equally engaging stories. Find it here by clicking to your left. If you were moved by this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave your like on the video. Every day we bring unique narratives that explore the complexity of life and the transformative power of love. Don't miss our upcoming content and tell us in the comments how this story touched you. We'll see you in the next story.